Draven had killed his first enemy at the age of 12. By 20, he had led raids on 3 colony worlds. Now, at 34 cycles, his forearms bore the scars of 23 campaigns, and his name made lesser species step aside when he walked past. The Margathi Empire had bred him for one purpose: war. He knew nothing else, wanted nothing else, and feared nothing in the entire galaxy. The transfer orders to Station 47 had annoyed him. Joint operations with other species meant politics, diplomacy, and endless meetings about cooperation. Draven despised cooperation. Warriors conquered. Warriors dominated. They did not share meals with prey species and pretend everyone was equal. His shuttle docked on the lower ring, and he gathered his equipment with practiced efficiency. The station was enormous, housing nearly 2,000 personnel from 15 different species. The Galactic Coalition had built it as a symbol of unity near the contested border zones. Draven saw it as a waste of resources that could have funded a proper battle fleet. Commander Sisseth met him at the airlock. The serpentine alien was tall and covered in golden scales that shimmered under the artificial lights. Her species, the Selenar, were known for their diplomatic skills and careful neutrality in conflicts. "Welcome aboard, Draven of the Margathi," she said, her voice carrying a slight hiss. "Your reputation precedes you. We are honored to have such an accomplished warrior join our security forces." Draven gave a curt nod. Flattery meant nothing to him. "Where are my quarters and duty assignments?" "Direct and efficient." "I appreciate that." Sisseth gestured down the corridor. "Your quarters are in Section 12. Your duty shifts begin tomorrow. Tonight I recommend you familiarize yourself with the station layout. The mess hall serves meals continuously. Deck 9 Central Hub." After storing his belongings, Draven decided to observe the station's population. The best way to understand any environment was to watch how others moved through it. He made his way to the mess hall, noting security stations, emergency exits, and defensive positions out of habit. Every space was a potential battlefield. The mess hall was larger than he expected. Long tables filled the room, and dozens of species gathered in small groups. He saw the insectoid trail clicking to each other in their rhythmic language. A group of Borean engineers, their thick gray skin marked with glowing tattoos, argued loudly about power distribution. Several species he did not recognize sat quietly in corners. And then there were the humans. Draven had read the basic files on humans before his assignment. They were a relatively new species in the Galactic Coalition, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 2 centuries ago. Their homeworld, Earth, was a middle-sized planet with high gravity and violent weather patterns. They had no natural weapons like claws or venom, no armor plating, no enhanced strength. They were administrator types from what Draven understood, paper pushers who had stumbled into space and somehow convinced the Coalition to let them join. He observed 3 humans sitting together near the serving line. They wore the standard station uniforms in various colors denoting their departments. They laughed about something, their voices carrying across the room. Soft. Weak. Draven dismissed them and moved toward the food. The serving area was staffed by a single human. She was female, shorter than the others, with gray hair pulled back in a tight arrangement. Her uniform indicated she was civilian support staff. Her face had lines around the eyes and mouth, marking her as older than the human average he had seen. She moved between large containers of food with steady movements, filling plates for whoever approached. Draven stepped up to the counter. The human looked up at him without any change in expression. Most species showed some reaction when facing a Margathi warrior for the first time. Fear, nervousness, respect. This human simply met his gaze and waited. "What do you have?" Draven asked. "Roasted meat, 3 types. Grain dishes, 4 variations. Vegetables cooked and raw. Protein paste if you prefer something basic." Her voice was level, neither friendly nor hostile. "What does your species eat?" "Meat. High protein." She filled a large plate with thick slabs of dark meat and added some kind of root vegetable on the side. "There's seasoning on the table if you want it. Next meal service is in 6 hours." Draven took the plate and found an empty table where he could watch the room. The food was adequate. The meat was properly cooked and the portions were generous. He ate while studying the various species and their interactions. The Margathi way was simple. The strong ruled, the weak served. Every Margathi child learned this from birth. Their entire civilization was built on military excellence. Other species had art, music, complicated social structures. The Margathi had war, and war had made them powerful. As he finished eating, Draven noticed the human cook moving through the serving area, collecting empty containers. She worked with the same steady efficiency she had shown before. Nothing wasted, no unnecessary movements. She reminded him of how supply officers worked in military camps, always maintaining their stations regardless of what happened around them. Another human approached the counter, and Draven watched their interaction. The cook smiled slightly and said something that made the other human laugh. They exchanged a few words before the second human left with a plate of food. Normal. Boring. Exactly what Draven expected from a support species. He returned his empty plate to the collection area. The cook was there organizing dirty dishes into cleaning containers. Food was acceptable, Draven said. It was more than he usually offered. But station life required minimal courtesy. The human looked up at him again, and for just a moment, Draven thought he saw something flicker in her eyes. Recognition, perhaps, assessment. But it passed so quickly he decided he had imagined it. Good. I'm Ruth. I run this mess hall. If you have dietary requirements or allergies, let me know. I keep files on everyone. She gestured to a small data pad on the counter. Makes my job easier. I am Draven. I have no special requirements. Simple. I like that. Ruth turned back to her work, effectively dismissing him. Draven left the mess hall and spent the rest of his evening exploring the station. By the time he returned to his quarters, he had mapped every major section and identified the critical systems. Tomorrow he would begin his actual security duties. Tonight he was satisfied that he understood this environment. The humans were irrelevant. Soft administrator types who cooked food and managed systems. He would tolerate their presence as required, work his duty shifts, and wait for his next real assignment. War was coming to the border regions. Everyone knew it. When it arrived, warriors like Draven would be needed again. He settled into his bunk and closed his eyes, his mind already planning training routines for the morning. Sleep came easily, as it always did for those who knew their purpose. 3 days into his station assignment, Draven established a routine. He woke before most of the station, completed his physical training in the empty gymnasium, and arrived at the mess hall just as it opened for morning service. The food was consistent, the portions adequate, and the timing allowed him to eat before the crowds arrived. On the fourth morning, he noticed something different. Ruth stood at a long metal table in the back corner of the serving area. She had arranged 7 knives in a precise line, from smallest to largest. Next to them sat a rectangular stone, a bottle of clear liquid, and a white cloth. The knives caught the overhead lights, gleaming like weapons on an armory rack. Draven took his usual seat with his breakfast, but his attention kept returning to the corner. Ruth picked up the first knife and examined it closely, holding the blade up to the light. She turned it slowly, checking every angle. Then she poured liquid from the bottle onto the stone and began to drag the blade across its surface in long, deliberate strokes. The sound reached across the mess hall, metal on stone, steady, rhythmic. It reminded Draven of warriors sharpening their combat blades before battle. But Ruth was a cook. Why did she need such sharp knives? He watched her work through his entire meal. She finished the first knife, tested its edge carefully with her thumb, and set it aside. Then she started on the second. Same examination, same precise strokes, same testing. Each knife received the same amount of attention, regardless of its size. Other crew members began filtering into the mess hall. Most ignored the sound or were already accustomed to it. A young human male approached the counter, and Ruth paused her work to serve him food. The moment he left, she returned to her knives without any change in focus. Draven had seen weapons maintenance many times. Every warrior culture maintained their tools with care, but warriors maintained weapons because their lives depended on them. Cooking knives were just tools for preparing food. The amount of attention Ruth gave to each blade seemed excessive. He finished his breakfast and approached the serving area. Ruth was on the 5th knife now, working with the same steady concentration she had shown for the previous 4. You sharpen them every day? Draven asked. Ruth did not look up from her work. Every morning after breakfast service. Before lunch prep begins. Why? Do they become dull so quickly? They need to stay sharp. Dull knives are dangerous, they slip. They require too much force. People get hurt with dull knives more often than sharp ones. She tested the blade's edge, nodded in satisfaction, and set it aside. Sharp knives cut clean. They do what you want them to do. Draven considered this. How sharp? Ruth picked up one of the finished knives and held it out, handle first. See for yourself. Carefully. He took the knife and examined it as she had done, holding it up to the light. The edge was perfect. He could see where she had worked the metal to a precise angle. This was not just sharp for cutting vegetables. This was sharp enough to cut through flesh and bone without resistance. This is a combat edge, Draven said, surprised. It's a proper edge. Ruth took the knife back and placed it with the others. A knife should be able to do its job. Whether that's breaking down a side of meat or cutting through thick root vegetables, it needs to be sharp enough to work. She picked up the sixth knife and began the process again. The sound of metal on stone resumed its steady rhythm. Draven returned to his quarters after his duty shift ended. The knife sharpening had bothered him, though he could not explain why. It was just a human maintaining her tools. Nothing unusual, yet something about the ritual had triggered a warning sense in his mind that he could not ignore. He accessed the station's database and searched for information on human culture. The basic files were extensive. Humans had a complicated history of tribal conflicts, nation-states, and global wars. They had fought each other continuously for thousands of years before finally achieving enough unity to venture into space. Draven dug deeper into human military history. What he found disturbed him. Humans had fought wars on a scale that matched or exceeded anything the Margathi had ever attempted. 2 global conflicts in a single century, hundreds of smaller wars scattered across their entire history. They had developed increasingly efficient ways to kill each other, from simple weapons to nuclear devices capable of destroying entire cities. The Margathi fought for conquest and glory. Humans seemed to fight for everything: resources, ideas, territory, revenge, religion. They created formal rules for warfare, then found ways to work around those rules. They built massive armies, then developed small specialized units that could operate independently behind enemy lines. He found references to something called guerrilla warfare, where humans would hide among civilian populations and strike at military targets before disappearing again. The Margathi considered such tactics dishonorable. Warriors should face warriors directly, but humans had no such restrictions. They used whatever methods achieved victory. Most disturbing was the information about human biology. They were persistence predators on their homeworld. They would chase prey animals for hours or days until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. Their bodies produced natural combat stimulants when threatened. They could survive injuries that would kill other species. They healed faster than most mammals their size. Draven leaned back from the terminal, processing what he had learned. These soft administrator types who cooked food and managed systems were descended from persistent predators who had spent their entire evolutionary history either hunting or being hunted. The next morning, he arrived at the mess hall early again. Ruth was already there and her knives were arranged on the metal table. Draven took his breakfast and sat where he could watch her work. She moved through her ritual with the same calm focus. Each knife received equal attention. She occasionally paused to wipe the stone clean or add more liquid, but otherwise the process never varied. Her hands moved with practiced confidence, showing no uncertainty about angles or pressure. A Borean engineer approached the counter during her work. "Hey Ruth, got any of those spiced protein bars today?" Ruth set down her knife immediately, served the engineer his requested items, exchanged brief pleasantries, and returned to her sharpening the moment he left. The interruption had not disrupted her rhythm at all. Draven realized what bothered him about the ritual. Ruth treated it like a meditation. No, not meditation. Like a warrior's pre-battle preparation. The Margathi performed similar rituals before combat, checking their equipment and centering their minds for violence. But those rituals prepared them for something they did rarely, only when necessary. Ruth performed her ritual every single day, as if she needed to be ready every single day. Another human entered the mess hall, a tall male with dark skin and engineering insignia. He saw Ruth at her work and grinned. "Still sharpening those things like you're going to war?" he called out. Ruth looked up and smiled slightly. "Old habits. You know how it is, I do. My grandfather was the same way. Kept his tools sharp enough to shave with." The engineer collected his food and sat down nearby. Draven approached the counter again. "You were military?" Ruth paused in her work and looked at him directly. Everyone asks that eventually. Yes, 20 years. Special operations. Retired 5 years ago? Why did you retire? Got tired of destroying things. Decided I wanted to create instead. She gestured at the mess hall around them. Feeding people feels better than fighting them. But you maintain your skills. Some skills you never really lose. Muscle memory. Training. It stays with you whether you want it to or not. Ruth picked up the final knife and began working on it. Besides, sharp knives make better food. That's reason enough. Draven watched her complete the last blade. When she finished, she cleaned the stone, stored her materials, and began prepping ingredients for lunch. Her movements in the kitchen were as precise as her knife sharpening. Everything in its place. Nothing wasted. Efficient and controlled. He left the mess hall with more questions than answers. Ruth was not just a cook. She was a warrior who had chosen a different path, but the warrior remained underneath. And if one human cook was a retired soldier, how many other humans on this station had similar backgrounds? That night, Draven could not sleep. He kept hearing the sound of metal on stone, steady and relentless like a countdown to something he did not yet understand. Draven began observing the other humans on the station with more attention. There were 43 humans total among the 2,000 crew members. They worked in various departments: engineering, communications, medical, administration. Nothing about their daily behavior suggested they were anything other than competent professionals doing their assigned jobs. But now Draven noticed small details he had missed before. The way they moved through corridors with constant awareness of their surroundings, how they positioned themselves in rooms to have clear views of exits, the casual way they assessed other species, their eyes tracking movement and calculating distances. During a maintenance drill, he watched a human technician climb an access shaft without safety equipment, moving with confidence that spoke of extensive training. When questioned by a supervisor, the human had shrugged and said, "I've climbed worse." What did that mean? What was worse than a 40-meter shaft with no safety net? He decided to learn more directly. After his shift ended, Draven returned to the mess hall during the quiet period between lunch and dinner service. Ruth was there, as he expected, preparing ingredients for the evening meal. She worked at a large cutting board, reducing vegetables into uniform pieces with swift, precise knife strokes. "May I ask you questions about Earth?" Draven said, approaching the counter. Ruth glanced up, her knife never pausing. "Sure, slow period anyway. What do you want to know?" "You said you grew tired of destroying things. What did you destroy?" "People, mostly. Buildings, equipment, infrastructure." She scraped the cut vegetables into a container and started on another batch. "Special operations means you go places quietly and break things that need breaking. Or you protect things that need protecting. Sometimes both. How did you learn these skills?" "Training. Lots of training. Started when I was 18 and never really stopped." Ruth set down her knife and reached for a different one, larger and heavier. She picked up what looked like a whole bird and began breaking it down with practiced efficiency. But the basics came from before that. My grandmother taught me to hunt and dress game when I was young. Camping, tracking, basic survival skills. She grew up in a rural area where that was just normal life. Draven watched as she separated the bird into component parts. Breasts, legs, wings, all removed with minimal waste. "You hunt your own food on Earth?" "Some people do. Not necessary anymore, but it's still common in certain regions. Good way to teach kids patience and respect for what they eat." She pointed at the separated meat. "When you kill and clean your own dinner, you understand what went into it. Makes you appreciate the meal more. The Margathi also hunt as training, but we hunt dangerous prey. Predators that fight back." Ruth smiled slightly. "We did that too. Plenty of dangerous animals on Earth. Bears, big cats, wild pigs. Depends on the region. My uncle got gored by a boar once. Nearly died. Still went back out the next season." She started another bird, her movements automatic. "But the really dangerous prey is other humans. We got very good at hunting each other over the millennia. Turns out we're persistent predators. We don't give up once we start chasing something." Draven had read about this. You run your prey to exhaustion. That's the basic idea. Humans can regulate temperature through sweating. Most animals can't. They have to stop and cool down eventually. We just keep going. Walk fast enough, long enough, and almost anything will collapse before we do. Ruth finished the second bird and moved on to a third. Makes us real stubborn in general. We don't quit things easily. A trail worker entered the mess hall and approached the counter. Ruth immediately cleaned her hands and served the insectoid alien a plate of prepared food. They exchanged clicking sounds that apparently constituted a greeting in Trell language. The alien left and Ruth returned to her work without missing a beat. "You speak Trell?" Draven asked. "Basic phrases. Helps to know a little of every language on the station. Makes people more comfortable." She gestured at the storage area behind her. "I keep files on everyone's dietary needs, preferences, and allergies. Can't feed 2,000 people without good organization." Draven considered this. The Margathi had conquered numerous species, but never bothered learning their languages beyond basic commands. Ruth, a cook, had learned enough of 15 languages to communicate effectively with all her customers. "What other things are normal on Earth?" he asked. Ruth thought for a moment while she worked. "Define normal." "Earth's a big place with lots of different cultures. But some things are pretty universal. Most humans learn to swim early. Water covers most of our planet, so you need to know how to not drown. We play competitive sports from childhood. Lots of them involve contact and impact. Team building, physical development, controlled aggression." Controlled aggression? Yeah. Kids need to learn how to handle physical conflict in safe environments. Sports do that. You learn to hit and get hit, to compete and lose gracefully, to work with teammates toward a goal, all useful skills later. She paused to organize her completed work. "My sons both played contact sports. Football, wrestling, martial arts. Came home bruised plenty of times, but they learned their limits and how to push past them." Sons. Draven had not considered that Ruth had family. "Where are your sons now?" "Both in the military. Following family tradition, I suppose. Their father was military too." Ruth's expression softened slightly. "We divorced years ago, but we all stayed close. That's fairly common. Military families understand each other." She moved to a different prep station and began working with root vegetables, peeling and cutting them with the same efficiency she showed everything else. "You know what surprised me most when I joined the coalition? How few species have standing militaries. Most races only fight when absolutely necessary. They see war as an aberration, something abnormal that disrupts regular life." "That is the logical view," Draven said. "The Margathi fight for conquest, but even we understand that war is separate from civilian life." "Right. But humans don't really separate them. War is just politics by other means. Trade is economic warfare. Sports are simulated combat. We compete constantly about everything. It's built into our psychology." Ruth tested a blade's edge and reached for her sharpening stone. "We've been fighting each other for our entire existence. Only recently did we decide to try cooperation instead, and honestly, we're still not great at it." She began touching up the knife's edge with practiced strokes. "Earth has maybe 200 nation-states. Different governments, different cultures, different priorities. We barely achieved enough unity to build a proper space program. The coalition keeps asking when Earth will unify under a single government. And we keep telling them it probably won't happen anytime soon. We like our divisions. They give us something to compete over." Draven absorbed this information, a species that competed constantly. That treated conflict as normal rather than exceptional. That taught their children violence through games and raised warriors from childhood without calling them warriors. "Do you miss it?" he asked. "The military life?" Ruth considered the question while she worked. "Sometimes. I miss the clarity. You have an objective, you complete it, you move to the next one. Simple purpose. But I don't miss the damage. Not just what we did to others, but what it did to us. You carry that weight forever." She finished sharpening and tested the blade again. Satisfied, she set it aside and looked at Draven directly. "Why all the questions? Most species on this station avoid talking to humans once they learn our history." "I am trying to understand something that does not make sense to me," Draven admitted. "You chose to stop fighting. You became a cook. Yet you sharpen your knives like weapons and maintain skills you claim not to want anymore. Want and need are different things." Ruth began cleaning her work area, organized and methodical. "I don't want to fight anymore, but I need to stay capable just in case. Because the universe is dangerous and humans learned a long time ago that safety is something you create for yourself. We prepare for threats even when we hope they never come." She gestured around the mess hall. "This is a military station on a border zone. Pirates raid shipping lanes nearby. Tensions between species flare up regularly. Pretending everything is safe would be stupid. So I keep my skills sharp, literally and figuratively, and I hope I never need them. And if you do need them?" Ruth's expression hardened slightly. "Then I'll use them. Same as any soldier would. But I'll go back to cooking afterward because that's the life I chose. Violence is a tool, not an identity. Humans figured that out eventually, even if we took way too long to learn it. Draven left the mess hall with more understanding but less comfort. Ruth had revealed something fundamental about human nature. They were not soft administrator types pretending to be tough. They were warriors pretending to be civilians, maintaining their dangerous capabilities beneath a surface of normal daily life. And if one retired soldier ran the mess hall, how many active soldiers walked the station corridors in civilian uniforms? That night, Draven dreamed of persistent predators that never stopped hunting and woke in darkness with his hearts racing. The alarm started at a 400 station time, cutting through the sleep cycles of 2,000 crew members with its harsh electronic wail. Draven was awake and armed within seconds, his combat training overriding any confusion. The announcement followed immediately through the station's communication system. All personnel, combat stations, pirate vessels approaching. Multiple bogies. This is not a drill. Draven ran toward his assigned security position in Section 7, his forearms checking weapons and equipment as he moved. Other crew members rushed through the corridors, some heading toward defensive positions, others scrambling to secure critical systems. The station had drilled for this scenario, but drills were never the same as actual combat. The first explosions came as he reached his station. The pirates had breached the outer hull in 3 locations using shaped charges to create entry points. Smart tactics. Hit multiple areas simultaneously to spread defenders thin. Draven appreciated professional aggression even from enemies. His combat team assembled quickly. 2 Borean shock troops heavily armored and carrying plasma weapons, 1 Selenar tactical officer coordinating communications, and surprisingly, 2 humans from the engineering department, both carrying standard-issue rifles with practiced ease. Breach in Section 9 near the storage bays, the Selenar officer reported. Second breach in Section 12, residential area. Third breach in Section 6 adjacent to the mess hall. Section 6, where Ruth worked. Draven pushed the thought aside. His duty was to defend Section 7 and prevent pirates from reaching the command center. Ruth was not his concern. She was support staff, probably already evacuated to a secure area with other non-combat personnel. The fighting started in Section 9 first. Draven heard the distant sounds of weapons fire through the station's structure. The pirates were professionals, not random raiders. They moved with purpose, targeting specific locations rather than causing general chaos. His team held position, weapons ready, watching the corridor that led from Section 6 toward their location. If pirates broke through the mess hall area, they would come this way to reach central systems. Movement. Corridor junction ahead, one of the Borean rumbled, his deep voice tense. 6 figures appeared, moving fast and low. They wore mismatched armor and carried a variety of weapons. Mixed species pirate crew. More dangerous than single-species raiders because they combined different tactical approaches. Draven's team opened fire. The corridor erupted in plasma bolts and projectile rounds. 2 pirates went down immediately. The others scattered, returning fire from cover positions. Standard corridor combat. Nothing Draven had not faced dozens of times. The fight was brief and brutal. The pirates were good, but they were attacking a prepared military position. Draven's team had superior cover and better angles. Within 3 minutes, all 6 pirates were dead or disabled. No losses on the defensive side. Section 9 secured, the communication system announced. Section 12 holding position. Section 6 report status. No response from Section 6. Section 6 respond, the Selenar officer repeated. Static. Then a human voice, male, breathing hard. Section 6 has hostiles in the mess hall. Request backup. Draven made his decision instantly. Hold this position, he told the Borean troops. I am going to Section 6. He ran before anyone could object. Section leaders had authority to reinforce where needed, and Section 6 was closest. More importantly, something cold had settled in his stomach at the thought of the mess hall under attack. He covered the distance in less than a minute, his powerful legs driving him forward at speeds few species could match. 2 other security teams had the same idea, converging on Section 6 from different directions. Good. More soldiers meant better odds. The mess hall doors were open. Draven could hear sounds of combat inside. He gestured to the other teams, establishing a quick tactical plan. Then they breached the room in a coordinated rush. The scene inside registered in fragments. Overturned tables, scorch marks on walls, 3 pirates near the serving counter. using it as cover while they fired at something in the kitchen area. 2 station security personnel pinned down behind food storage containers, unable to advance or retreat. And Ruth. She stood in the kitchen, partially obscured by equipment and steam from broken cooking systems. She held a large knife in one hand and what looked like a metal ladle in the other. A pirate lay on the floor near her, not moving. Another pirate was slumped against the wall, clutching his leg where dark blood poured between his fingers. Draven's tactical mind processed this even as he engaged the 3 remaining pirates. Ruth had not evacuated. She had not hidden. She had fought, and judging by the 2 downed pirates, she had won. The 3 standing pirates turned to face the new threat, but they were already at a disadvantage. Caught between multiple security teams and with their backs exposed to the kitchen, they had no good options. They tried to fight anyway, managing to wound one of the Salinar officers before going down under concentrated fire. The combat lasted 15 seconds. Then silence, broken only by the sound of damaged equipment and heavy breathing from multiple species. Draven moved toward the kitchen. Ruth stood exactly where he had first seen her, apparently uninjured. The knife in her hand was red with blood. The pirate near her feet had a deep wound across his throat, the cut precise and clean. The other pirate against the wall had sustained a similar wound to his leg, severing major blood vessels. "Are you injured?" Draven asked. Ruth looked at him, her expression calm but focused. "No, they breached through the storage area. 3 of them. I was prepping breakfast ingredients." She gestured at the counter where vegetables lay scattered. They didn't expect resistance from a cook. One of the human security officers entered the kitchen and surveyed the damage. "Ruth, you okay?" "Fine, made a mess though. Going to be behind schedule for breakfast service." She said this seriously, as if her primary concern was meal timing, rather than the fact she had just killed 2 pirates with kitchen implements. The human officer smiled slightly. "Pretty sure everyone will understand if breakfast is late today. Medical teams arrived to check the wounded. The pirate with the leg wound would survive if treated quickly. The other was already dead." Station security began clearing the mess hall and documenting the breach point. Draven watched Ruth clean her knife with a dish towel, the blood wiping away to reveal the perfectly sharp edge he knew she maintained every morning. She inspected the blade for damage, found none, and set it aside. Then she began assessing what needed repair in her kitchen. "The overhead ventilation is damaged," she said to no one in particular. "Cooling system for the storage area is compromised. I need engineering to fix that before the food spoils." She moved through the space like the attack had been an inconvenience rather than a life-threatening situation. Draven had seen combat veterans behave this way, the ability to compartmentalize violence and return immediately to normal tasks. It required extensive training and experience. Commander Sisseth arrived with additional security forces. She took one look at the scene and her golden scales darkened slightly, a sign of concern in Selinar physiology. "Casualties?" she asked. 2 pirates dead, 1 wounded, the security chief reported. "No station personnel killed. Minor injuries only. The cook neutralized 2 hostiles before security arrived." Sisseth turned to Ruth. "You engaged armed pirates alone?" Ruth shrugged. "They came into my kitchen. I was working. They were between me and the panic button." She gestured at a red emergency switch on the far wall, blocked by where the pirates had entered. "So I dealt with them myself. With knives. I keep them sharp. They work well." Ruth paused, then added, "One of them shot at me. Missed. I used boiling water from the stockpot on him first. Burns are disabling. Then I closed distance while he was distracted. The other one tried to run. Bad choice. Running from a predator triggers chase instinct." She said this clinically, like she was explaining a cooking technique rather than describing how she had hunted down and killed a fleeing pirate in her own kitchen. Sisseth was quiet for a long moment. "We will need your full report for the incident files. After breakfast service. I have 2,000 people to feed and we're already behind schedule." Ruth turned to the human security officer. "Can you get me temporary cooking equipment?" "The backup systems in storage room 3 should work." The officer nodded. "I'll handle it." Ruth immediately began organizing salvageable food and planning workarounds for damaged equipment. Within minutes, she had established a temporary serving line using backup stations. By the time the all-clear sounded through the station, she was plating the first breakfast orders. Draven stood in the corridor outside the mess hall, watching through the doorway as Ruth served food to shaken crew members. She smiled at each person, asked about dietary preferences, maintained her normal routine as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. Draven had watched her kill with the same calm efficiency she used to prepare meals. No hesitation, no panic, no mercy. Just practical application of violence when circumstances required it. Then immediate return to her chosen purpose. The other species on the station did not understand what they had witnessed. They saw a lucky cook who had defended herself. Draven saw something else. He saw a persistence predator who had stopped running from violence and simply integrated it into her existence. The knife sharpening ritual made complete sense now. Ruth did not sharpen her knives because she wanted to fight. She sharpened them because she knew with absolute certainty that violence could come at any moment, and when it came, she would be ready. For the first time in his adult life, Draven felt a cold understanding of what fear actually meant. Not the fear of death. He had never feared death, but the fear of something fundamentally different from himself. Something that wore the mask of civilization while keeping weapons sharp beneath the surface. The Margathi fought when they chose to fight. Humans were simply always ready. The station returned to normal operations within 2 days. Engineers repaired the hull breaches. Medical teams treated the wounded. Security forces upgraded defensive protocols. The captured pirate was transferred to Coalition custody for interrogation. Life continued as if the attack had been merely a temporary interruption, rather than a violent assault that could have killed dozens. Draven could not return to normal. He kept replaying the scene in the mess hall. Ruth standing in her kitchen, knife in hand, 2 bodies at her feet. The calm expression on her face. The way she had immediately resumed her duties after killing. It haunted him in ways that actual combat never had. He attended the mandatory post-incident briefing in the conference room. Commander Sisseth reviewed the attack timeline, analyzed pirate tactics, and praised the effective defense. Several personnel received commendations for their actions. Ruth was not present. She had sent a detailed written report and declined to attend, citing meal service obligations. After the briefing, Draven approached Commander Sisseth privately. She was reviewing data on her terminal, her golden scales reflecting the screen's light. "Commander, may I speak with you about the human cook?" Sisseth looked up, her serpentine eyes unreadable. "Ruth, what concerns you?" "Her background. Her capabilities. She killed 2 armed pirates with kitchen implements. This was not luck or desperation. This was training and experience. Yes, her military file is quite extensive." Sisseth pulled up records on her terminal. 20 years of service. Special operations. Multiple combat deployments. Expert ratings in close quarters combat, survival skills, and tactical planning. She retired with honors 5 years ago and requested civilian placement. We were fortunate to have someone with her organizational skills volunteer for our mess hall. Draven stared at the file summary. "You placed a special operations veteran in a kitchen?" She requested the position specifically. Said she wanted to feed people instead of fighting them. Her words. Sisseth closed the file. "Is there a problem with this assignment?" "No, I am trying to understand." Draven chose his words carefully. "The Margathi separate warriors from civilians. Our soldiers are warriors first, last, and always. But Ruth claims to be a cook. Yet she maintains combat skills that never diminish. How is this possible?" Sisseth was quiet for a moment, considering her response. "I have commanded stations with multiple species for many years. Each species approaches violence differently. The Margathi, as you noted, create warriors. The Berean maintain security forces but consider violence regrettable. The Trell avoid combat entirely when possible. Most species in the Coalition treat fighting as something separate from normal life." She gestured toward the mess hall direction. "Humans are different. They do not separate warrior from civilian as cleanly as others. They teach violence to their children through play. They train their entire population for potential conflict through mandatory education and cultural practices. Military service is common and respected. A human can be a farmer, a teacher, a cook, and still retain combat capabilities that would rival professional soldiers from other species. This seems dangerous. A population always ready for war? Perhaps, but it also makes them remarkably resilient." Sisseth pulled up additional files. "Human colonies have survived situations that would have destroyed other settlements. Pirates avoid raiding human ships because the casualties are rarely worth the prize. Even human civilians fight back with effectiveness that surprises aggressors. She highlighted a specific section. When humans joined the coalition, we conducted standard psychological evaluations. Every species undergoes these assessments. The results for humans were concerning. Nearly all of them showed elevated capacity for violence and aggression compared to galactic norms, but they also showed strong social bonding, cooperative behavior, and ethical reasoning. How can a species be both violent and ethical? That is the human paradox. They are capable of tremendous violence but choose to restrain it through social structures and moral frameworks. They create rules for warfare. They establish codes of conduct. They punish their own members who violate these standards. It is as if they recognize their own dangerous nature and decided to control it through culture rather than evolution. Draven absorbed this information. You are saying humans are predators who train themselves to behave like prey species. Not quite. They remain predators, but they are predators who understand cooperation and long-term thinking. They realized that endless conflict among themselves was counterproductive, so they created systems to channel their aggressive tendencies into less destructive outlets. Sports, competition, economic rivalry. They still fight, but they fight in ways that do not destroy their civilization. Sissith closed the files and looked at Draven directly. You are disturbed by Ruth because she challenges your understanding of how warriors should behave. The Margathi warrior is always a warrior, clearly identified and separated from civilian life. Ruth is a warrior who chose to become a cook, but the warrior never left. She simply added another role on top of the first. This is normal for humans. It is deeply abnormal for most other species. Is this why humans are restricted from certain military operations? Draven had read about treaty limitations that applied specifically to human forces. Partially, human effectiveness in combat situations makes other species uncomfortable. But the restrictions also protect humans from themselves. Without rules and oversight, they tend to escalate conflicts beyond necessary levels. They do not know when to stop fighting once they start. Persistence predator psychology. They chase until the prey falls regardless of how long it takes. Sissith's terminal chimed with an incoming message. She glanced at it and then back to Draven. Is there anything else? One question. How many other humans on this station have similar backgrounds? Similar to Ruth? Approximately 60% of the human crew have some form of military experience. The Coalition prefers to station humans with such backgrounds at border installations. They are more effective in crisis situations. This attack proved that assessment correct, 60%. More than half the humans on the station were former soldiers pretending to be civilians. Engineers, technicians, administrators, medical staff, all potentially combat capable at levels that matched or exceeded dedicated security personnel from other species. Draven left the commander's office with more questions than he had arrived with. He wandered the station corridors, observing humans with new awareness. They moved the same as always. They smiled and talked and performed their duties efficiently. But now he saw the constant assessment in their eyes, the way they tracked movement, how they positioned themselves relative to exits and potential threats. Had they always been this way and he simply had not noticed? Or had the attack changed something in how they presented themselves? He found himself outside the mess hall during the quiet period between lunch and dinner. Through the window he could see Ruth at her prep station, cutting vegetables with precise, practiced movements. Her knives gleamed under the lights, the same knives she had used to kill 2 days ago, already cleaned, sharpened, and returned to their normal purpose. Draven entered the mess hall. Ruth looked up as he approached the counter. Draven, you are outside your normal meal times. Did you need something specific? I read your military file. Special operations, 20 years, multiple combat deployments. Ruth set down her knife and wiped her hands on a towel. Yes, that was my previous career. Now I am a cook. Both things are true. How do you separate them? When you sharpen your knives, are you thinking about cooking or combat? Both, neither. Does it matter? Ruth picked up her knife again and resumed cutting. A sharp knife is useful for any purpose. I maintain my tools and my skills because that is responsible behavior. The universe does not care whether I want to be peaceful. It will be dangerous regardless. So I stay prepared while hoping I never need to be. Most species would find this exhausting. The Margathi train for war intensively, but we also rest between campaigns. You seem to maintain constant readiness without any break. Ruth paused her work and considered this. It is not constant readiness in the way you think. I am not in combat mode every moment, but I never let my skills atrophy either. It is like speaking multiple languages. You might primarily use one, but the others are still there in your mind, ready if needed. My cooking skills are primary now. My combat skills are secondary but maintained. She gestured around the kitchen. Everything I do here has parallels to military operations. Logistics and planning, resource management, time optimization, crisis response. The skills transfer even though the context changed. I run this mess hall like a military operation because that methodology is effective for feeding 2,000 people with different needs. And when the pirates came, I responded as trained. Assess threat, neutralize threat, continue mission. Ruth's expression was matter of fact. They were between me and the panic button. I had seconds to decide. My training took over. Afterward, I had meals to prepare. So I prepared meals. Compartmentalization is a valuable skill. Draven realized what unsettled him most. Ruth felt no conflict between her roles. She was simultaneously a cook and a warrior, and she saw no contradiction in this duality. The Margathi would have struggled with such divided purpose. Warriors fought. Civilians supported. The roles were separate and distinct. But for humans, all roles were integrated. A cook could be a warrior when needed. A warrior could be a cook when circumstances allowed. The flexibility was their strength and their danger. Do you ever regret your military service? Draven asked. Every day. The things I did. The people I hurt. The damage I caused. Ruth's voice was quiet but steady. But regret does not change the past. It only informs the future. I chose to become a cook because I wanted to balance the scales. I destroyed for 20 years. Now I create. Maybe that does not make up for it, but it is the best I can do. She finished her vegetables and moved to another prep station. You have been watching the humans on this station more carefully since the attack. Trying to figure us out. Let me save you some time. We are exactly what we appear to be. People doing jobs we trained for. But underneath every job is the same foundation. We are survivors from a dangerous world. We learned to fight because our environment required it. That knowledge never leaves us. This makes humans dangerous allies and terrifying enemies. Yes, that is accurate. Ruth did not disagree or soften the statement. The coalition understands this. That is why there are restrictions on human military forces. We are effective at violence. Too effective sometimes, so they limit how and when we can apply that effectiveness. Most humans accept these restrictions because we recognize our own nature. We know we need external controls. Draven nodded slowly. Thank you for your honesty. You are welcome. Now, unless you need food, I have dinner prep to complete. He left the mess hall with a better understanding of humans and a deeper unease about what that understanding meant. The Margathi feared nothing because they were the apex warriors of their region, but humans were persistence predators who integrated violence into every aspect of their culture. They did not separate warrior from civilian, combat from daily life, destruction from creation. For the first time in his life, Draven understood why his people had not yet challenged human space borders. It was not that humans were stronger. It was that they were relentless in ways the Margathi had never needed to be. And that relentlessness, combined with technological capability and numerical advantage, made them opponents best avoided. Fear was not weakness. Fear was recognition of genuine danger. And Draven had finally learned to fear the right thing. 5 weeks passed after the pirate attack. The station settled into its regular rhythms. Cargo ships docked and departed. Diplomatic meetings continued in conference rooms. Engineering teams maintained systems. Security forces ran drills. Life proceeded as designed, orderly, and efficient. Draven continued his duty assignments without incident. He trained in the gymnasium, patrolled his assigned sections, and attended briefings. But something fundamental had changed in how he perceived his environment. He no longer saw the station as a collection of civilians protected by warriors. He saw it as a community where everyone maintained different levels of combat readiness, with humans occupying the highest tier of that spectrum. On the morning of the 42nd day since the attack, Draven arrived at the mess hall for breakfast at his usual time. Ruth was already there, her knives arranged on the metal table, her sharpening stone positioned precisely. The morning ritual that had once seemed excessive now appeared entirely reasonable. He took his breakfast and sat where he could watch her work. The sound of metal on stone filled the quiet space, steady and rhythmic. Ruth moved through each blade with practiced focus, testing edges, adjusting angles. achieving perfection through repetition. When she finished the seventh knife, Draven approached the counter with his empty plate. "May I learn to do what you do?" he asked. Ruth looked up, surprised. "Sharpen knives?" "Yes, properly. The Margathi maintain our weapons, but your technique is different. More precise. I would like to understand it." Ruth studied him for a moment, evaluating the request. Then she nodded. "Tomorrow morning? Come early before the first meal service. Bring a blade you want to sharpen." The next morning, Draven arrived at the mess hall an hour before normal service. Ruth was already present, her knives laid out, her sharpening stone ready. She had set up a second station next to her own, complete with a spare stone and oil. "What did you bring?" she asked. Draven produced one of his combat knives. It was a Margathi military blade, designed for close quarters fighting. The edge was serviceable but not optimal. He had maintained it adequately, but never with the precision Ruth demonstrated. Ruth examined the blade, holding it up to the light, checking its balance and condition. "Good steel. Poor edge geometry. You have been sharpening at the wrong angle for this blade's design. Here, watch." She demonstrated on one of her own knives first, explaining each step. The proper angle to hold the blade. How much pressure to apply. The number of strokes needed. How to test the edge safely. Her teaching was clear and methodical, the same way she had probably instructed younger soldiers during her military service. Draven attempted to replicate her technique on his own blade. His first efforts were clumsy, the angle inconsistent. Ruth corrected him patiently, adjusting his grip, repositioning his hands. Slowly he began to understand the rhythm and precision required. Sharpening is meditation, Ruth explained as they worked. It requires focus and patience. You cannot rush the process. Each stroke builds on the previous. You are not fighting the metal. You are refining it, finding the edge that was always there but needed to be revealed. They worked in silence for a while, the sound of metal on stone creating a synchronized rhythm. Draven found the process calming in unexpected ways. His warrior training emphasized aggressive action and overwhelming force. This technique required something different. Control, patience, attention to small details. "Why did you really want to learn this?" Ruth asked without looking up from her work. Draven considered lying but decided against it. "I am trying to understand how you maintain two identities simultaneously. Warrior and cook. Combat skills and peaceful purpose. The Margathi separate these things. You integrate them. I want to understand how." Ruth finished her current blade and set it aside. "It is not two identities. It is one identity with multiple skills. I am Ruth, I was a soldier. Now I am a cook. Both are true. Both are me. The skills I learned in one life inform how I approach the other, but they do not conflict because I chose both paths." She picked up another knife and began working on it. "The Margathi create warriors and only warriors. You train for combat from youth and fight until you are too old or too injured to continue. Then what? You have no other skills, no other purpose. You are a weapon without a war. Warriors serve the Empire. That is sufficient purpose, is it?" Ruth glanced at him. "You are what, 34? You have fought for most of your life. What happens when the fighting stops? When peace comes, if it ever does? Who will you be when you are not a warrior anymore?" Draven had never considered this question. The Margathi did not prepare for peace. They prepared for the next war always, an endless cycle of conflict and conquest. The idea of existing without warfare seemed impossible. "Humans learned something important over our history," Ruth continued. "War is temporary. Even the longest wars end eventually. If your entire identity is wrapped up in fighting, you are destroyed when the fighting stops. So we integrate warrior skills into broader identities. A soldier can also be an engineer, a cook, a teacher, a parent. When the war ends, they have something else to build upon." She tested her blade's edge and nodded in satisfaction. "My grandmother taught me this. She survived a terrible war on Earth, saw entire cities destroyed, lost most of her family. When the war ended, she could have remained bitter and broken. Instead, she became a teacher. She taught children to read, to grow food, to build things. She remained capable of violence if needed, but she chose to create instead. She showed me that strength is not just the ability to destroy. It is also the ability to create, to nurture, to build something better." Draven worked on his blade, processing this information. His edge was improving, becoming sharper and more refined with each stroke. The metal responded to patient attention in ways that force alone could never achieve. "The morning I saw you sharpen your knives, I thought you were preparing for war," he said. I am. Every day." Ruth's voice was matter-of-fact. "But I am also preparing breakfast." "Both things are true. The sharpening ritual serves both purposes. That is the integration I am describing. One action, multiple meanings." They continued working as the station began waking around them. Crew members started arriving for breakfast. Ruth paused her sharpening to serve them, then returned to her work without breaking concentration. Draven marveled at how smoothly she transitioned between roles. Cook, then warrior, maintaining weapons, then cook again. No separation. No conflict. By the time morning service began in full, Draven had achieved an edge on his combat knife that exceeded anything he had managed before. It was sharp enough to cut without pressure, the blade sliding through test materials with minimal resistance. Ruth inspected his work and approved. "Good. You have the patience for this. Practice daily, and it will become automatic. The skill will serve you in combat and in life." Over the following weeks, Draven returned each morning to practice. Ruth taught him additional techniques: how to maintain different types of blades, how to recognize when a blade needed more than sharpening, how to care for the stone itself. The lessons were practical but also philosophical. Each session revealed something new about the integration of skill and purpose. Other crew members noticed his regular presence in the mess hall. Some of the younger Margathi warriors stationed on the base began questioning him about it. Why was he spending time with a human cook? Why was he learning cooking techniques instead of training for combat? Draven did not explain. They would not understand until they experienced the same realization he had. That true strength was not just the ability to fight. It was the ability to choose when to fight and when to create, to maintain readiness without allowing violence to consume your entire existence. 6 months after the pirate attack, new transfers arrived at the station. Among them were 3 young Margathi warriors, fresh from their training academies and eager to prove themselves. They swaggered through the corridors, challenging others with their postures and dismissive attitudes. Draven remembered being exactly like them, confident in their superiority, convinced that warrior culture made them better than everyone else. He watched them enter the mess hall for their first meal. They approached the counter where Ruth was serving food, and Draven saw the dismissive looks they gave her. Just a cook, just a support species human, nothing to respect or fear. Ruth served them their meals with her usual efficiency, showing no reaction to their attitudes. The young warriors took their food and sat together, talking loudly about their combat training and their expectations for real action. Draven continued his breakfast, knowing what would eventually happen. One morning, perhaps in a few days or weeks, those young warriors would arrive early. They would see Ruth sharpening her knives with precise, practiced movements. They would notice the combat-ready edges. They would start asking questions, and gradually they would learn what Draven had learned, that the most dangerous warriors were not the ones who advertised their capabilities. They were the ones who maintained their skills quietly, integrated into daily life, ready but not eager for violence. They were the humans who had learned to balance destruction and creation, to be simultaneously capable of both. One of the young warriors approached the counter again, demanding extra portions with a tone that assumed automatic compliance. Ruth calmly explained the rationing system and offered alternative options. The warrior insisted, his voice rising with entitled aggression. Draven tensed, ready to intervene if necessary. But Ruth simply maintained her calm expression and repeated the station's food distribution policy. She neither yielded to the demand nor escalated the confrontation. She held her ground with quiet confidence. The young warrior eventually backed down, confused by her refusal to be intimidated. He returned to his table, muttering complaints to his companions. They would learn, Draven thought. They would learn that humans did not respond to posturing the way other species did. Humans assessed threats calmly and responded with whatever force was appropriate. No more and no less. Ruth caught Draven's eye and smiled slightly, acknowledging his readiness to assist. He nodded back, a small gesture of respect between warriors who understood each other. After breakfast, Draven helped Ruth with the morning cleaning, something he had started doing regularly. They worked in comfortable silence, organizing equipment and preparing for lunch service. The mess hall was her domain, but he had come to see it as something more. It was a place where violence and peace coexisted, where sharp knives served meals instead of taking lives, where a warrior maintained her skills while building something positive. "Thank you," Ruth said as they finished. For understanding, most species never do. They see the contradiction and cannot resolve it. But you managed to look past your assumptions. You taught me something important, that fear is not weakness. It is recognition of capability. I feared you because I recognized what you are, not despite being a cook, but including it. You are more complete than any Margathi warrior because you chose to become more than just a weapon. That means a lot. Coming from you. Ruth began her knife-sharpening ritual, and Draven joined her with his own blade at the adjacent station. They worked together in the quiet morning hours, the sound of metal on stone marking time. Two warriors from different species maintaining their skills while choosing to build instead of destroy. The station hummed with life around them, unaware of the small moment of understanding between a Margathi who had learned to fear and a human who had learned to create. Outside the station, stars burned in the endless dark. Conflict stirred in distant systems. Pirates prowled trade routes. Empires maneuvered for advantage. The galaxy remained dangerous as it had always been. But in the mess hall of Station 47, a warrior and a cook sharpened their knives together, preparing for whatever came next while hoping it would never come at all.